Kaya Bulu, Nala Karich, Kian Karak Ninja Buja. Hello everybody. I would like to acknowledge the Noongar peoples as the original custodians of this land. And I would like to welcome Keith Bradby from Gondwana Link, who's going to do a presentation for us today about the 20 years to overnight success. Is that right, Keith?
That's about it. I can use that title. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I'll let you lead the discussion, and then when it's time to share the PowerPoint, if you can do the sharing, then everybody will be able to see that.
Yep. I'll get it up. Thank you. And I'd just like to add to your acknowledgement and welcome. I'm down here on Menang country, and I give my recognition to elders past and present, and my personal and organisational commitment to elders of the future who need a slightly better pathway than we've helped them with in the last couple of 100 years. Now I'll just flick to screen share.
Yes.
And put the presentation up.
Lovely.
And that's all working. Isn't it wonderful when the technology works?
It is. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Now I'd like to start with this photo of one of our many hundreds of funny little eucalypts that we have in this corner, because it's one of the many that are only in the southwestern corner, and it's a quite stunning little big flower, and it's only a little bit out at this point, and that's 20 years on, and it is getting close to 20 years. That is how I tend to see Gondwana Link a little bit. A bit special from this southwest corner. It's still hitting its straps. And I thought I'd
the bee eaters.
The bee eaters, one of the truly migratory birds that we get in the southwest. They come down from New Guinea in the north every year, almost like clockwork. I think their clock might change a little bit with the way the weather's changing, climate's changing, but there they are. And I think the important work we need to do includes giving a bit of hope to people in this world that where we hear constant bad news about the environment. We need good news. We need to make that good news. And with that good news, I think both us and the environment becomes healthier.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to start with that pretty grim recognition that we are in a time of fundamental change. There's a lot of environmental destruction, no other words for it, in the last few hundred years. We've now reached 412 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. That's an amount far higher than human beings have ever experienced since we evolved. And we are moving from the reasonably gentle time of it's called the Holocene into this scary time called the Anthropocene. So there's no more time to waste. The work we have in front of us is extremely urgent.
Yeah.
And I think that's being reflected by the scale of work that is starting around the world. And I've just done a bit of a grab bag there of some of the examples I know of. There are more. Billion tree programs in Pakistan, China, Africa's 100 million hectare
Wow.
AFR program. I had the pleasure about 18 months ago of helping with a Landcare masterclass in northern Zambia with people from all over southern Africa. And the bit they gave me was to sit down with the Landcare people from 3 different countries and design a 5 million hectare regeneration program.
Wow.
And they're the sort of numbers we need to talk about. There's a little cheeky looking fellow poking out of the slide there called Tony Renato. He works with World Vision. I think he's now in Melbourne. He comes from Melbourne. Tony's like a hero in southern and west and eastern Africa. He's credited with developing farmer-managed natural regeneration systems that have revegetated millions of hectares already. So we hear a lot of bad news out of Africa. There's some good news there too. But all these countries and many more people scaling up to the extent needed to tackle degradation and to improve the world's environments for both people and nature. We're a bit slower in Australia. Our formal government program is called 20 million trees at the moment. It's a lot less than 1 billion.
So
but we do
came
have
up with that title.
Oh, well, it's the Commonwealth Government's latest
Okay.
grant program. Very unambitious. But we do have a number of initiatives across the country that are trying to tackle things at scale. The two I'm closest, well, two are the Gondwana Link in the southwest corner. You'll have to excuse me, I'm coming out of a cold. Gondwana Link in the southwest corner and the Great Eastern Ranges along the east coast. There's a number of smaller initiatives at various stages, and the mighty 10 Deserts program, where all the Indigenous groups across the desert heart of Australia are united and attracted some significant funding. Gondwana Link, there it is. It's a concept excuse me again. We initially developed in the mid-1980s down here on the south coast, based on some good work come out of the WA Museum and other places on where the best opportunities for conservation left are. It works on the basis that as the climate changes, species are going to move south, and we're the south. It also straddles the rainfall, the climatic change from wet forest to dry inland. And as I'll show in a minute, it does pick up where most of the important systems and rare species are left. The mission statement across the top is what we've had since 2002, and I think that consistency is one of our great strengths. Oh, sorry, I thought I wasn't going to cough. I obviously am. Two important factors about the Southwest I wanted to remind ourselves of. One of them is that it's a reasonably recent agricultural landscape. Most of the country we work over in the farming areas was opened up for agriculture since the late 1950s, 1960s. And there is a documentary we put together on that era and its aftermath, the growth into Landcare, which is still available on the web. Google Million Acres a Year. And there should still be a schools program that we put together at the time. But it does tell the personal story of a number of farmers and other key individuals who the era and grew into the beginnings of this time of restoration. The other really important fact behind our program is that we, in the last 2 or 3 decades, have realised just how mega diverse. It breaks all the rules. It's reasonably flat, it's reasonably fertile, it's reasonably dry. It's not a tropical rainforest going up and down mountain slopes, but it is now acknowledged as just as rich as the tropical rainforests. And there's a great little animation on the web, why poor places are more diverse. It's been put together by Minute Earth for WA's Kwongan Foundation, which explains this in a very entertaining way. But we've for each of the last 2 or 3 decades, scientists have named more plants than in any decade since settlement, and the numbers I've got suggest that since 2004, we've added a newly discovered species to our plant list every week.
Wow.
And there you can see some work done by the great Professor Steve Hopper and Paul Goyer from the WA Herbarium, which it maps the hottest hotspots in this southwest hotspot. And we've managed to pick up most of them with the Gondwana Link swath. But the little inset map also shows you the very particular problem we are dealing with, in that you've got the Stirling Range National Park, that long rectangle in the middle, and the richest areas for plant species are actually either side of the Stirling Ranges, not in the Stirling Ranges, as you would expect. So the areas we opened up for farming in the 60s are at least as ecologically important as the big national park itself. Landscape scale conservation, which is what we're in the business of, probably sits on 4 main principles.
Yeah.
The reality is that nature works at scale, so we need to. You can't do it with postage stamp size reserves. You've actually got to have big areas that are joined up that species can move across. It is multi-everything. There's no simple ways of doing this. You've got to deal with the complexities of life and try and have fun while you're doing it. And I think the key bit is that by working at scale, you're trying to treat the causes of ecological decline, not the symptoms. And I'm afraid we're putting that much effort into rare species and so on, all of which is laudable work, but we're not doing the bigger stuff that's also needed. And given the arrival of the Anthropocene, as a colleague, Peter Bridgewater, recently said, we tend to be saving the man overboard while the ship is sinking. And we're about the ship. And,
I like that analogy.
It's a good one, isn't it? He's a smart man, Peter. And look, what we do is often called corridors and connectivity conservation.
Yeah.
But in Australia, I'd suggest it's about big areas, because we do have some species like the bee eaters that follow regular paths, but we don't have wildebeest and caribou and all those animals that go up and down every year. Most of our wildlife is opportunistic. It'll go where it rains and where it can get a feed. The other big characteristic of our program is that we've built it largely with private funding, generosity and goodwill. And there's just some example of a wonderful, wonderful people we've got to meet on the various supporter tours and so on. So a certain amount of government money has come in as well, but I'd make the point that with these people here and many others who have supported the leading edge of the work, that makes it possible for the follow-on. And who are we? Well, we're lots of people. It's a loose collaboration across numerous groups, organisations, individuals. That's one of our recent collections. Very important to note that we don't have a formal structure. We try and work wherever there is maximum cooperation, maximum ambition, maximum fun, trust, and all those things. And that means sometimes some people get the darks on us and want to do things their way. Well, good on them. It's stuff that's happening. We actually don't think you can actually build that, what we've called viral contagion, that rapid growth in activity by trying to do it through any tightly structured arrangement. And there's my point. Life isn't tidy. It's us that have got to adjust to that. That squiggle map on the wall is actually the photo of a flowchart we were all talked into drawing in Canberra about 20 years ago, as the Commonwealth Government looked at the world of Landcare and said, oh, it's got to be more tidy and strategic. And we tried to explain to them that it never would be. And I've chosen, and Gondwana Link has chosen, to be out the window where the work is needed. We don't have a 50 centimetre thick plan. We're working to a strategy that's pretty simple. I take the view that if your strategy can't be printed on a tea towel, then it's not strategic. So we've got 5 key elements. We're in the process of adding a 6th, which I'll come to again. But you've got to put a big vision out there, and we're delighted with how people have responded to that big vision. It's a bit more normal now, but in 2000, 2002, it was a bit scary for people to think about the scale we wanted to work. We got things moving by getting on with it and building momentum. We largely try and help it be more ambitious and tackle the key gaps. We use a planning approach to try and focus the effort into the strategic and effective actions rather than those that people feel like doing. And it is all about minimal structure and maximum resources on the ground. Now, I want to give 2 different examples of what that work can mean. One is, as an example of how exciting it is to work in Western Australia, there is now an area called the Great Western Woodlands, stretches for 400 or 500 kilometres in a few different directions. It's all that bush, the other side of the wheat belt, before you get to the Nullarbor Plain. And 11 years ago, it was pretty unknown, wasn't it? It was totally unrecognised. It was a job of work which our colleagues in the Wilderness Society largely did, with funding from 2 American-based groups. How embarrassing that Australians hadn't recognised the potential. But they pulled together what knowledge we had on that area. Professor Harry Recker coined the phrase Great Western Woodlands. Some people in Perth said, but it's off to the east. And he said, it's a national treasure. It's in the west, which I thought was great. And as soon as that information was together, it wasn't any difficulty at all getting the then Minister for Environment, David Templeman, to jointly launch a report and the concept with Sonny Graham, one of the Naju elders from Norseman. And the Great Western Woodlands is now recognised as the largest remaining temperate woodland in the world. So it was there all the time. And it's almost as if we discovered it, but it was there all the time. Gives you an idea of scale. 70% of Victoria, 2.5 Tasmanias. Where are we? 66% of the United Kingdom.
Wow.
A multitude of tenures. Some reserves, a number of pastoral properties, lots and lots of mining leases, and what our colonial society used to call vacant Crown land. We worked after, I should add that after the report was launched, governments got enthusiastic. There was some very, very good political footwork done by the Wilderness Society, and we got bipartisan support for improved conservation and management, and a funding commitment from government. In good faith, we then spent a couple of years helping the development of a biodiversity and cultural conservation strategy. But I probably can't say it any other way, but at the end of that time, there was no more money. The agency was tending to fall back into doing what it had always done, and we were a bit disillusioned. So we then commissioned a scoping study across all the main stakeholders, about 240 of them in the woodlands. That came out and said, you're going to have to think about proper land use planning. It's a huge area. You've got to do it in bites. It pointed out that a lot of landholders nearby and in the woodlands were doing great stuff anyway. And that picture's a Carl Garran farmer called Robbie Trenorden. who spends a lot of time out in the woodlands helping out, and here he's plugging an old mining drill hole. A lot of open drill holes out there. We call them ghost holes. If anyone knows what a pit trap is, that you use for just a half-metre deep hole that you use for trapping small animals and lizards in biological survey. Well, these act as pit traps, except the animals can't get out. So you'll often find them full of little skeletons. We've worked with a number of people. The plan there is one we did jointly across the shires of Dundas and Gondwana, 2 nickel mining companies, Western Areas and the defunct Norilsk, and the traditional owners to start thinking about what was needed and what we should do conservation to the area. Bit controversial out there. It's, it's the most mineral-rich province of Australia. I'd never been placarded before, but after we funded a study to see what proper fire management of the woodlands would be like, we launched that report in Kalgoorlie, and all of a sudden we had a number of people walking outside with placards telling us we were trying to shut down the various mines, which was just, if anyone who's seen the super pit knows you're not going to shut it down. Apart from the fact the town largely relies on it and other mines. But it's interesting that an early uptake came from the group Millennium Kids, who I've got a huge amount of admiration for. They worked with BHP Billiton to set up a schools program, a kids program really, done through schools. Phenomenally successful. Didn't just open up the eyes of lots of kids, but I can still remember the BHP manager for the area saying he'd been out there 14 years and he hadn't really gone bush and understood the bush until the Millennium Kids came along. So I think not only did Millennium Kids do a great job of education and helping kids appreciate the bush around them, but the ripple effects out into the community were fantastic. Mm. And of course, a few celebrities. We got Tim Flannery over for the launch. We had a big art photograph exhibition. And when the kids from one of the Boulder schools talked about the Great Western Woodlands in their annual parade down the main street of Boulder, everyone cheers. Yeah. I think if I'd done it, we might have been chased out of town. And I should add, Millennium Kids have gone on and been working with the Aboriginal kids of Coolgardie. And they're just about to launch this little book of drawings of all those kids. And you hear a lot about the problem you can have with bored kids in towns like that. Well, give them things to do, give them things they enjoy, put them in a position of authority as the people who know about country more than most of the rest of the population. It's been a great program.
Keith, if I can add a bit there, Millennium Kids gave a presentation, Katrina Annier, to one of our forums, and spoke about this program in Coolgardie, and it just gave you shivers up your back to think the way that she works. You can't not engage with what the children have found and speak to. So she has a remarkable way of working.
She does, and I think, well, it taught me a lot, and about how we should and can work. But the importance of drawing the kids in can't be underestimated. Can't be overestimated. Gotta get that right.
And in this day and age, like the children need to know that they can have an influence, because they need to make sense of what's happening.
Particularly the Aboriginal kids, I think. And one of the things Katrina did, I gather, was she got the Aboriginal kids out of the schools first, took them out on country, so that when they talked with the whole school, those kids were the experts. Some of those kids might not have been that flash at the 3 R's, but they know about country, and they've got a long tradition of knowing about country. So putting them in a position where they are the school experts, I think was a fantastic step forward. I'll give some other educational examples towards the end here.
Sorry for butting in.
The other big change, like I said, and I'll be blunt about it, we were a bit disappointed about lack of progress on real conservation working with government. There was a steadfast refusal to think about any tenure change, any new national parks. But after 18 years in the courts, in I think it was 2012, the federal court granted the Naju people exclusive native title over a huge swath of the woodlands, some 4.5 million hectares, and that's the federal court making that judgment and declaration in Norseman. So, and with elders for whom it had been a long wait.
Yeah.
Now, we'd been working with the Naju for many years by that stage, and there's just such an obvious synergy between our conservation goals and their desire to be back managing their country like they used to do. So for a number of years, we've supported the growth of the Naju Conservation Aboriginal Corporation, helped them build capacity, got a detailed conservation action plan in place. They've set up a ranger program and a rural fire brigade. Dundas Norseman didn't have a rural fire brigade. They've protected some special places. That tree, the base of that salmon gum is actually a water tree. It's a very special phenomenon, cultural icon, useful bit of vegetation. I don't know quite what to call it from that part of the world where Naju people have played with, I think is the right word, a young salmon gum sapling, broke it into 3 or 4 trunks and created a water holding hollow in the middle, which is a bit of an emergency water when travelling between nama holes and granites, but also is a bit of a magnet for birds and wildlife to come in to get a drink, so a good hunting spot. And these trees are dotted throughout that landscape. These two guys, not long after, well, I think the plan was being done, spotted this tree dangerously close to being pushed over by main roads on some expansion and jumped out, talked about Naju values and saved it. And the other photo of the two people with spray packs is the first training day for the Naju Rangers, where we said, well, where do you want to do it? And they nominated a particular rock hole, which is a fair way out of town. Okay, you want to go there, we'll go there. Well, turned out it had this massive infestation of a plant called Nagura burr, the largest, if not the only infestation in southwestern Australia, potential to cause sheep growers, wool growers, tens of millions of dollars per year if it got away. So getting people back on country, managing their country their way, has been a great step forward. And as of about 15 months ago, we handed the money, the utes, the trailer, the ranger base over to the Naju, and they've been running their own show ever since. You go to Norseman nowadays in the main streets, there's the pub, the supermarket, courthouse, police station, shire offices, and ranger base. And I think that adds up to the essential infrastructure. Now I want to jump out of the woodlands and talk about the central bit of Gondwana Link. For those who know the area, from Fitzgerald River National Park, across to the Stirling Ranges, south to the Prongerups, over to the Walpole Wilderness area. You know, over the 1,000 kilometres of the Gondwana Link area, we've got about 900 kilometres is already intact bush. So it's only these little gaps we've got to fill, and you've got this mega extent of bush from the wet to the dry, and you've got our insurance policy for the wildlife movements that have to happen. Of course, there's a mosaic of land uses across that landscape, and what you've got there in the bottom left corner of the photo is a stream reserve along Karakarup Creek, and you've got a property called Nowanup, which pretty marginal farming country that's now been purchased and restored. I'll be talking more about Nowanup. Then you've got the small 4,000 hectare Karakarup Nature Reserve, a large bit of bush that Bush Heritage Fund have purchased, and they've restored the connecting bit of paddock between the nature reserve and their bit of bush. And in the background, a property owned by two wonderful conservation buyers, Bill and Jane Thompson, who came out especially to do that, came over from Queensland. And in the far distance, you've got our destination, the Stirling Ranges, and right next to which Greening Australia own another large property. So it's joining the dots. That's what the dots look like on a map at the moment. Properties in red are owned by conservation organisations, NGOs, Greening Australia and Bush Heritage. The orange ones are private conservation buyers and investors, and all have covenants on them. And then we've got a bevy of golden stars across the landscape where Greening Australia and the Shell Oil Company have helped farmers plant significant areas to biodiverse restoration. Because whatever you do, if we do achieve that 72-kilometre link up between those two national parks, you know, the wallabies and the bandicoots might run up and down, but the cockatoos are still going to fly around in all sorts of directions looking for food. So you've got to have more than a kilometre or two of bush in a line. And all that's, you know, happening according to an agreed plan. Getting a bit out of date now, but getting a bevy of different people into a room to work on plans is always hard. There's always too much good work to do on the ground. The work in this part has involved securing a lot of bush. There's about 11,000 hectares of bush being purchased and protected. But the critical bit is replanting the gaps. And this may look like a farmer checking his crop, but it's actually a 250 hectare paddock that's just been direct seeded to over 100 different local species. The diagram shows how the key man here, Justin Johnson, has done the work to mimic the mosaic of soil types across that area, and he's taken his seed from the identical vegetation communities on the same soil types in the adjoining bush. So we've tried to carry the work from revegetation through to proper ecological restoration with good design. And that's really important because you can plant a heap of trees and you'll get a lot more parrots and kookaburras and magpies and crows, but you won't get all the other species. You'll get the opportunistic, not the ones that are suffering in these landscapes. There's Justin getting even better at it with a 400 hectare area that was way above your head and you could barely walk through it after 3 years. The science has come, the techniques and science of this restoration work has come a long way. You can see the machine he uses puts down about 25 hectares a day, and the line of fire running across a paddock is, for those very difficult to get and fit through a machine seeds, he actually collected some significant piles of brush and burnt them in situ, then raked them out hurriedly and hosed them down. And we've got a number of species growing there that we couldn't get otherwise into the work. We developed restoration standards for this work in 2010. They've now, excuse me, become part of a national set of standards with an easy little wheel for checking out how well you've done, and it's becoming quite competitive out there where the different groups and different individuals are all trying to show that they're doing a better job than the others. And I think a bit of competition is a great thing. Another example of how we work, we've been sort of called marriage brokers, and that's probably vaguely accurate. Here's Bill and Jane Thompson, who rang up Gondwana Link in 2010. We're living in the Glasshouse Mountains of southeast Queensland, but wanted to do some good for the environment and felt it was a bit crowded where they were. So they sold up over there and bought a 1,400 hectare property that was more than half bush. That was 2010. By 2011-12, we put them in touch with Carbon Neutral and the Australian government's then funding program. That combined to replant about 120 hectares. That was done by Justin Johnson from Threshold Environmental. And when that was done, the Bush Heritage guys came in and set up a partnership with Bill and Jane to help manage the whole property. And there's a picture of this magnificent couple. One of the paddocks they started with, and 3 years later, the bush coming back around them as a result of the plantings. Very, very quickly, wanted to touch on the business of knowing whether you're making a difference and engaging a wider section of the community. There's been some fantastic work done by the Citizen Science Unit at the Conservation Council of WA. They're not only energetic and frugal and very cheap to work with, they're also very smart. And they've come up with a monitoring system that will enable us to compare the health of the bush, be it at Margaret River or be it at Caledonia or Norseman, based on the functional guilds of birds that are present, not necessarily the individual species. It's also a good system for training up people. And it's interesting that an awful lot of the citizen scientists that come down with Nick and Katie and others are recent graduate students, university students, or students doing their courses. A number of them, an overwhelming majority of them are female, which probably proves that that's a smart agenda. But this has actually proved to be a great way of giving those students the field experience they need to not only get a job, but to do their jobs well. So Nick and the others have set up formal volunteer training programs, and then we try and connect them to properties and to groups and get this ongoing monitoring. And now I'm not a big fan of graphs because I don't understand them well, but this one I understand because it's been explained to me many times. That actually shows, I won't go into it in detail, but it actually shows that as we've improved the quality of the restoration on the different properties, the use by wildlife has increased significantly. So even the most recent plantings have more wildlife in them than the earlier plantings. It's a wonderful validation and of the effort we've put in to shift everyone from revegetation to restoration. And I did also want to mention we chose not to invest heavily in the science at the beginning. We figured we knew basically what we had to do. We had to build the science as we went along. And this is very lucky, very glad all these guys got back to Albany that day, because I'd hate there to have been an accident. It's probably just about the most eminent bunch of botanists and geneticists you'll get in Western Australia. And they came and approached us, and together with Justin developed up a genetics program that looks at not just did the species do well, but are we starting to support the long-term evolutionary processes that built the wonderful richness of southwestern Australia. And it's not costing us much. They found the money. I like that bit too. The other element we're perhaps a little bit slow to pick up on, but we're going gangbusters with now, is that of course we're on Nuya country down here. So with an early property we helped Green Australia purchase, Nowna. We'd invited that wonderful man in the photo at the bottom, Eugene Eads, and a bunch of elders that he organised came out the property in 2006 and said, oh yeah, we know this joint's important. And we said, well, here's the news, we don't have gates anymore. And the elders came back, they designed what they wanted Eugene to do there, he did it, got some young fellows to help him. It's now 12 years later. There's something like 18,000 people gone through formal camps and courses that Eugene has run. Oops, what's my computer doing? We've got a small ranger team works from the property, and what you can just see in those two illustrations, they've done a 10-acre dot painting representing families and seasons, and have started putting symbols across the landscape, totems, and the one in the bottom right-hand corner is Carter. It's a 300-metre Carter planted next to the Stirling Ranges, Carter being, of course, the racehorse Goanna. So that's a quick overview of the immense array of great stuff that's happening out there that we've had a role in catalysing and helping along, but I think we just had to give it a bit of a kickstart. It's been a great community to work with and lots of good things. The other key strategy we're adding, now that we've got a head of steam up, is how do we engage with a wider spectrum of the community to get support for the transformative change needed and support for maintaining that change. And that's where we turn to education, and as I say there, education in all its forms, from schools through adult education, through to visitor programs and the lot. And yeah, so we'll run through some of them, and the photo you're looking at is a group of University of West Australia restoration ecology students. 40 or 50 come down for a week every year, get some formal classes, and then go out on site with the various groups. Here they're on a salt skull just north of the Prongerups on Peter Luscombe's property with Lucia Query from the Friends of Prongerups Rangers Link group, talking to them about the need for shade and shelter for all animals in that landscape. And it was a warm enough day for there to be a brilliant example of it right there. The arts is one good way of reaching out. I think it evokes all sorts of emotions you don't tap with formal education. And we've given a lot of priority to a number of different artists, but particularly the Noongar artists and the Nudju artists. This slide is a wonderful exhibition which has been touring a number of towns across the southwest and Great Southern. Paintings done collaboratively through weekend campouts led by Joey Williams, the man standing there. And Joey's actually telling the story of the eagle across Korkirkanira, the Stirlings, and it's just one of those magical moments where you get insights into totally different ways of seeing the landscape and thinking. Joey, of course, runs a commercial enterprise now, Penati Tours, and we can recommend it. I think we've now been to 8 different towns with these large landscape portraits, and had openings and reached out to a whole heap of different people. The Now and Up property has been pivotal in this, and I should add, if it's not clear already, that I think part of the antidote to the Western disease, the Western approach to land as a commodity, has been to reintroduce, to provide opportunities for the Noongar community to share with us their approach to land. And school groups over many years coming out to Now sharing, learning, even the simple act of standing in a circle on a family camp and sharing each story as you go around the circle. You know, learning on country. And that's been taken to a new height for the Now property in that last September after a number of camps with Curtin University students, their elder in residence, the wise looking guy with the bigger beard in this photo, Professor Simon Forrest, joined with Eugene Eads and dreamed up the Now Bush University. We've now signed a statement of intent with Curtin to establish that at Now. It's Vice Chancellor Deborah Terry there on the right. Not only did we sign the statement of intent, we signed one of Errol Eads' paintings as well, did it Noongar style. And the arrangement, as Simon put it, look, if you want to teach chemistry, you go to the laboratory. If you want to teach engineering, you go to the workshop. You wanted me to teach culture in a classroom? So as part of their reconciliation plan, Curtin intend to bring an enormous number of their students through regular camps at Now and already had great assistance from a number of faculties in that. And as many of you would know, I mean, Curtin's a very international university, and you get, I mean, last camp we had Maori students from New Zealand, we had a young lady from Afghanistan, we had a number of people from Singapore, and some from the Middle East. An incredible international array, and the response of these young people to the depth of Noongar culture is one of the most exciting things I've seen. There are lots of other opportunities for engagement. There's a fenced off exclosure west of the Stirlings at Ballajut, which gets regular survey. It's had bandicoots introduced and other small mammals will be in there shortly. Regular groups come down and survey them. There's a group of student doctors who just graduated who all came down to help with the tree planting program north of the Prongarups and wanted to wear their hospital garb, which we thought was just fantastic. And we'd like to build a lot more of these sort of hands-on opportunities. We've just had the Festival of Birds and Biodiversity in Albany. So this isn't our deal, it's a deal we help with. It's part of that general flowering in the community. I haven't seen the numbers for this year, but my guess would be 3,000 or 4,000 people have come through the town and participated in various events over a couple of months. Now, we are really serious about getting closer to getting better at reaching out to the broader population and to a lot of adults. And we're very serious about proving the socio-economic work of what we're doing. We've worked for a few years now with the Development Commission on a tourism, they're calling it tourism, I'm calling it adult education, but a biodiversity drive trail across the Great Southern, and we would hope to extend it west to Margaret River and out to Norseman and the Woodlands. But what we want to do here is capture the incredible narrative of this landscape of how you've got the oldest continuous ecosystem on Earth, the oldest continuous culture. You've got species that have been here 40, 50 million years, and you've got species that you can actually see evolving. They're changing before your eyes across the great soil mosaic of the southwest. We think tourism at the moment is a very shallow exercise that concentrates on giving people scenery, and we think there is great value in making it a deep and rich exercise where people get to appreciate what Professor Kingsley Dixon has said, the many things here that contradict your knowledge of life on Earth. Southwest is a special place. And we've had initial economic analysis of what we're proposing, and if we go significant with this. It's got some sort of multiplier of $1 brings in $27 over 10 years across the landscape. But it is a very different approach to visitors. And as I said, I see it as an incredible opportunity in adult education. I just wanted to touch on what it is we're trying to help people understand more. And in a country that's still obsessed with 3-year electoral cycles, I'd like to see people start thinking in centuries. This is a theoretical graph from a bunch of noted ecologists led by James Aronson, who's been here a few times now, which shows how you don't just impoverish an ecological system or a natural system. You impoverish all the socio-economic and ecosystem services and so on that come with that system. Now, at the moment, we're down at the impaired state, but we're ambitious enough to want to not just rebuild a functioning natural system, but to add on all the benefits that humans get if they work with nature rather than against it. And understanding where you've come from is pretty important if you want to build the future. So we're fortunate to have a few historians working with us. The two ladies in the middle is Andrea Gaynor from University of Western Australia and Alexandra Vlachos from the University of Bern. Alexandra came out here last year. She's interviewing a few notable locals. Came out last year to do a comparative history of the Great Western Woodlands and the Daintree Rainforest. That's exciting, but we've got a hook now. She understands how rich in stories the Southwest is and is looking to greatly extend her work. We think there's a book or two in the offing, and that's a fine thing. And the fellow in the inset is the James Aronson I've mentioned, who we're working with a bunch of universities and other institutions on the connections between restoring the environment and restoring human health. And it can be as simple as getting kids out to play, but it can be a lot more beneficial than that. Just to finish off and to reiterate that we do get people thinking in longer timescales. The contemporary wisdom seems to be the Australian bush grew up with fire, so you've got to burn it every 6 or 7 years or it's not healthy. Well, we now know that's bunkum, and very, very detailed work that CSIRO and the Department of Biodiversity have done in the woodlands now shows that a young woodland is at 200 years. A mature woodland starts happening after 500 years. The older the woodland, the more biodiversity is, and the older the woodland, the less flammable it is. So if ever there was a challenge for our society, it is how do we get back to the original fire regimes, which are good for people and protection and for the ecosystems. And that's not just a change in knowledge, it's a change in cultural attitudes towards fire. So I hope I've given you something to think about. And I'm pretty happy to ponder it with people and think about what connections we can make between those wanting to learn more and those of us learning more through our daily life. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Keith. That was a great presentation. Hard to think that in 50 minutes you've spanned 20 years of grafting. Would be one way to look at that. But a question that popped into my head was the organic nature of the project that you've set in place. Who maintains that overarching connection between the bits that sometimes work, sometimes don't, come in, come out? Is that's that strategic plan that you showed? And are you the one that keeps your hand over all of that?
It's a good question, and I'm really glad you used the phrase, the organic structure, because
Yeah.
we use that phrase a lot and you get looked at sideways by people who prefer a detailed linear plan. And we're quite brazenly just kept making it up as we go along and letting it adapt to the... We didn't know how to do this when we started. We just knew we needed to start and we had to learn on the way. In terms of where we guide it and prod it and try and fill gaps, yeah, it is still a very small number of us in the middle. There's 2.5 people work out of this office. And one fellow we've had on for a few years, Peter Price, who looks after the Great Western Woodlands program, where no one else was stepping up to look over the whole area and able to attract the funding needed. And there is, of course, a board that looks over our shoulders of people largely entirely drawn from organisations that have got involvement across the link. And every few years we try and get all the groups together and have a bit of a wongy. But it is quite informal. There may be better ways to structure it. We haven't found them yet. Well, we have actually. I've looked at a few American models and most of them only cost a couple of $1 million a year to run. And we'd rather spend that on the ground. But what we are entering into is a significant period of appraisal and sharing the learnings of the last 16, 17 years, including the structural ones. We set up informally in 2002 at a time when this was a bit of a pipe dream. Would we set up in the same way again? No, but it was probably the best way to set up back then. So your questions are good ones that we don't have ready answers to, but we want to work on those answers to help others.
The other element that obviously this webinar is going out to our members in the Australian Association for Environment Education, and because education is what we have a passion around, you signalled that education was an element that you're looking to engage with. Is there anything in particular that any message we could give out to members that that would be helpful? And in some ways, I often think, well, often you go and have a conversation with somebody, listen to what they are saying, offer something, if it fits, and that's that organic nature you have. If it fits where you're at, you can either take it up or not. And just given the breadth of where our members sit, there may well be some useful tools or strategies that they could share. Is that something that...
Well, I can put on both my hats too, because
Okay.
Chairing the WA Landcare network, we've become increasingly aware that a lot of the formal, almost curriculum type programs of environmental education, which I think were developed in the 90s and 2000s, don't seem to be very available. I've had 2 conversations with primary teachers in the last couple of weeks, where they've been very uncertain of what's out there and that they can tap into. Yet just going beyond Gondwana Link, I'm very aware that places like the Southeast Regional Council of Urban Landcare Circle and the Nature Conservation Margaret River and various groups have some fantastic material for school. And I'm not sure to what extent your members can access and know about that stuff, but I think we need to put our heads together, excuse me for the coughing, and work out some better ways to make the existing information more readily available. I think with the speed at which the scientific knowledge of the Southwest has exploded in the last 15 or so years, we need to think about how we update that material to show the incredible story we have here. I didn't mention we're working with a scientific artist who is working on how to portray the evolutionary tree of life for various species here, both through virtual reality and through artistic sculptures and stuff. I think huge amount more of that is needed. So this is a hell of a shopping list we're talking about here. And I think what we'd be really happy to talk with people about and cooperate with people on is how do we get more people, students, adults, university, primary schools, out into the bush for those deeply enriching experiences that combine Noongar and Nudju culture with the richness and variety of the bush.
The association has a national website which was purpose-built to offer educational resources for education for sustainability. So that may be, and that was in recognition that teachers are looking for material, but they find it very time-consuming to go through a multiple of websites to find what they need.
Yes.
That's one item that we could begin to consolidate. What us as a chapter here in WA have always felt, and that is that there are many good programs that seem to have got put on a shelf somewhere and forgotten. And as you indicated, like Greening Australia put together an amazing resource that may just need to be refreshed. You know,
that's been our thinking as well.
Yeah.
Very happy to pursue how we can combine forces on doing that. You've got the platform already. We know where some of the materials, and we know where some of the people are who can refresh it, as you would.
Yep. Well, then that's certainly a nice first step, is to look at, you know, can we herd material towards that website and then let everybody know that it's freely available. And the idea is that it has to comply with the Australian curriculum. So the links are then made for teachers. But we also have in our members communities, other NGOs, universities, all sorts of things. So I know our time here is limited, but you know, this could be an opportunity to have a wongi later on about you know, what are some potentials, and put out a plan of, it's the gathering of, we always say we're going to have a gathering.
No, wongi works for me. It's the right word. Yeah.
Oh, well, we always use that as kids in Kalgoorlie, so now we'll have a wongi.
Yep.
So, yeah. Is there anything else that you think, I think you've pretty much covered everything. I'm aware that you've done remarkably well for having, you know, come through a flu. I can't think of, the only other thing that I would comment on is that your idea of a 500-year plan is something that Millennium Kids actually speak about. And I think that might be where many groups need to go next, is get beyond the political 3 to 4 year thinking.
I think that's absolutely pivotal. And as I drive around, you know, people say, "Oh, well, there's a bit of bush out here." And you look at it and you think, let's put ourselves 200 years ahead. You can see what's already happening. You know, I think that's sort of one, two. Mining companies can be quite exciting in that they'll often think at least 50 years ahead. Right. And if they can do it, we can do it.
Actually, I had as one of my points when you talked about mining leases as being part of all this collection. Having grown up in Kalgoorlie, of course, you knew about mining, and don't go near the shafts and all that sort of thing. And later on you learn about the trap, you know, the exploration holes that are just left uncovered.
Yep.
So it's the government certainly has let the ball drop on at making sure that people, when they exit a mine site, leave it in the condition that they're supposed to do. Coincidentally, one of my roles for a couple of years was to be work for a mining company in Kalgoorlie, and I wrote their exit plans for the mine closure. And it made you fully aware of what the rules and regulations are, but also you knew that being made accountable becomes a political issue, and that's a lot harder.
Well,
but there are many mines. Many mining companies are very willing to work in with.
Many are, but we still have 10,000 or thereabouts abandoned mine sites in Western Australia, which no one knows the future of, and no one's repairing. And I think I mentioned this broad use of the term education as part of our mainstreaming strategy. The other mainstreaming strategy we're running with is a joint project led by the Environmental Defenders Office to look at our experience along Gondwana Link over the last 16, 17 years, work out where the law is an opportunity and where the law is an ass, and where there is a need for significant reform. And, you know, Western Australia, of all states, is lagging a bit on legal safeguards. And, you know, we can't shirk the fact that we've got to bite that bullet too.
Yeah. Yes, it's, as you said, you got picketed for the first time ever, and I can well imagine that. But that's about educating people that there's nothing.
In a non-threatening way.
Yeah.
And obviously some things worry some people, and we've got to help them.
But I must say, if you've ever taken a walk through that beautiful woodland near Norseman, you can't help but be impacted by it.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to suggest that we leave the conversation there for the moment, and I really do look forward to working out a way of assisting.
Me too.
Our organisation can.
Yeah, me too. We're just leaving it here for the moment, but we've got to regroup on this.
Absolutely. We'll be regrouping, that's for sure.
Yep.
But just for now, so that the members can see that we've had this wonderful presentation, and Keith, you and I can pick up on this in a couple of weeks or
That'd
whenever.
be great.
Okay.
That'd be great. Good on you,
Thank
Jennifer.
you so much.
Thank you. Righto.
Bye.
Bye.